Hello and you're very welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Now, can we kiss goodbye to Apple expansion in Europe now that it has committed $500 billion to the US in investment to please Donald Trump? And speaking of Apple, it's upgraded its AirPods Pro 2 to be clinical hearing aids. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And lastly, we're going to squeeze out a review of the new affordable iPhone 16e, which replaces the iPhone SE. JJ Clark is with me. And JJ, every week now brings some sort of public gift or offering at the altar of Donald Trump from big tech. And this week, it is $500 billion from Apple in investment in the US for a new factory, for a new academy in Detroit, for new hires, AI, engineering. And we're all starting to ask ourselves now, is this the start of the long goodbye from Ireland?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. But I suppose I'm curious about this strategy that all the tech founders are adopting with Donald Trump. And is it straight out of the Elon Musk playbook, i.e., we'll promise you this thing, so you're off our backs regarding tariffs, but we mightn't necessarily deliver on it. Like in 2018, they promised, what was it, 350 billion over the next 5 years, and that didn't really materialize as it planned, as it was planned out to be.
It's a straight pitch. It's a straight pitch to Donald Trump. Please don't put that extra 10% in tariffs on our iPhones, which are all made in China. So anybody who knows this conversation knows that the Trump administration is obsessed with tariffs. So 25% on Canada and Mexico, 10% on China, on almost anything coming in from China. Now, where are all the iPhones in the world made? Most of them anyway. China. What is the most profitable company in the world with the biggest margin for a major industrial company? Apple. Based on what? iPhones coming in from China. Which company would hurt the most if a 10% tariff went in on China? Apple. So it's cheap for Apple to say, tell you what, we will build a new factory in Texas to make AI servers. Probably going to do it in the States anyway. But we'll announce it now and let you take credit for it. We're going to build a new academy in Detroit, Michigan. We're probably going to do it anyway, but we'll announce it now, let you take credit for it. Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, who always has the inside track on Apple, he totted up the sums and he reckoned that there was some new investment there, but maybe about 10% more than they're going to already announce.
And is Trump aware, what do you suspect here? Is Trump aware of the fact that people are just saying the stuff that's already planned anyway and giving him credit? Or is he, is that ego so big that he's just like, Well,
I don't know, but think about it yourself. What do you think? I think he doesn't care. I think as long as he gets to stand up on primetime television and say that my economic plan is working and jobs are going here, and they were going to go to Mexico. They were never going to Mexico, by the way, but if they were, they're now going to the States. That is a PR win for him. It allows, it allows the 49% of people who voted for him to feel, well, I don't like him. He's a bit of an asshole, but he seems to be delivering on the economy. And even if he is throwing a tantrum and trying to bully people into it, well, so be it. It's working.
Yeah. And there's another question there about, does protectionism work? And I was really looking earlier today and yesterday to see if there's any working examples of where it did work. And there's really no good examples of it. US steel was a big one after the Second World War. Europe and Japan were decimated by, the war. And so they weren't able to produce as much steel, and that's where US Steel made a big, they increased share size, market size, but it didn't work. And since the 1970s, they've had tariffs on, so any steel coming in, and so is it just is that going to lead to a dilapidated state of technology in America?
I mean, it's hard to say because tech usually breaks through most macroeconomic problems. If you think of COVID, for example, the tech companies all doubled their stock price there, even though none of us could fly. Right. We all had to use services. But a lot of other sectors went down, tech didn't. Tech in general is immune from that kind of thing. Excuse me. The wider problem is whether it tanks the economy in general. Most economists think that tariffs are bad. Now, to put this in context here, though, where do we stand in Ireland? So Apple has 6,000 people in Cork. About every few years, it adds a few hundred to that tally. A new building has just come on stream there. So the question for us is, and for the EU, is this a problem for us in Ireland? If the tech companies are now trying to appease Trump by investing more there and directing more of their activity over there, does that mean less over here? Does that mean we're particularly vulnerable? Because Ireland is one of the countries in the EU for tech firms. Now, the answer to that, I think, is not in the short term, because Apple has its base down there, has 6,000 people. When an iPhone is announced on the stage in Cupertino every September, back in Cork, within minutes, they're organising the logistics, not only for Europe, but for half of Asia as well. It's very hard to move that out of Cork, and all of the finance and all of the logistics. These are guys in their 50s and their 60s, Corkonians, a lot of them, who have been there since the 80s or the 90s. So it's very hard to move those out. Where I think we might be in trouble with tariffs is other stuff that Trump has announced. So there's a couple of things in particular they've announced. Trump has said that he's going to put tariffs to combat taxes and fines in Europe. Now, what are taxes and fines? They're things like the GDPR fines, like the €1 billion fines on Meta. Actually, Meta is over €2 billion in fine from the Dublin-based regulator, GDPR regulator, Data Protection Commissioner. Yeah. All of that money goes to Ireland. All of the money comes to the revenue. All of it goes to paying schools and, social welfare and public sector bills and everything else. He's now going to take aim as well at Commission Naman, because Commission Naman is a big regulator based here in Dublin. It is responsible for regulating online video for all of Europe. So that's YouTube and most of the big platforms. Now, what Trump is saying is that there will be penalties and tariffs on countries and blocks that penalise American companies for a variety of reasons, including for cutting down on their freedom of speech. Okay, now that's something that the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, does do in the interest of a more civilized internet and a more regulated internet. So we could be in big trouble there.
Yeah, and without it becoming too much of a political, conversation, Micheál Martin going over there for St. Patrick's Day, it's this line he has to tread where, it's a really narrow tightrope, because essentially Germany, France and the rest of the EU aren't so dependent on US investment as we are, as Richard Curran said last week on this podcast. And will it take a lot of sort of licking up, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I mean, the smart thing to do, if you look what Emmanuel Macron did this week, Emmanuel Macron, French president, was over in the Oval Office, did something no other world leader has done, I think, ever to Trump. Trump was talking about the amount spent in Ukraine and the differing amounts between the US and the EU, and Trump said that actually the EU will get their money back because they're loans. And Macron reached out, touched him on the leg, and said, just to be clear and to be correct. And he corrected him and clarified. And Trump just sort of seemed to take it. Now, at the same time, Macron was praising Trump. He was saying what a great friend he was. He was joking around with him. He was doing that kind of frat boy college, boxing.
Jostling each other.
Yeah, and sort of, all of that kind of stuff. And that seems to be the way to do it with Trump. Praise him, say he's a great guy. But at the same time, be firm and actually put your foot down where the case requires. Now, Micheál Martin can't do that. Number one, because he's nowhere near as capable or as charming as Macron. Martin is a perfectly affable guy, but he's not in the same league as Macron. But very few people are in the same league as Macron. Also, Trump doesn't give a goddamn about Ireland other than his golf course down in the west, in Clare. So the soft power that we have there won't be with Trump. So Martin's options are very, very limited. He needs to just turn up, be formal and be polite. Don't try and plumb Trump too much, because then he'll look
weak.
He'll look weak and he'll look bad back home. Only do that if you know you're going to get something in return. If he can leak that Ireland has got some exemption from tariffs, then you can do anything you want. Then you can, kiss his boots. That's fine. But if you're not going to get that, and if you can't sell something like that back home, you can't really do it in front of the cameras because you'll look weak and ineffective.
Yeah, you don't want to be waving the papers when you get off the plane, Neville Chamberlain style.
Well, I don't think we're at that stage yet. But yeah. Anyway, look, let's move on to, speaking of Apple. They had, this was announced last year, but it's still kind of interesting that the AirPods Pro 2, which I have here, which lots of people have, these ones here, right there, those ones there, these top of the range flagship AirPods, €279, can now be used as clinical hearing aids because of an update that Apple has pushed through. And I've tried it out, and it's kind of interesting. It does sort of actually work.
Yeah, what do you think? Like, and can you explain just what exactly a hearing aid does?
Yeah.
Just for the listener?
Yeah. Well, look, a hearing aid is the little grommet thing that you put in your ear, okay? And it's supposed to be discreet and invisible. Has a battery that lasts several days, maybe up to a week or two, and amplifies massively the sound around, particularly for voices. They cost, though, from about €1,000. Like, if you go to get your hearing tested, most times you'll be recommended a device that costs $2,500, $3,000. A friend of mine has a hearing aid for one of his ears that costs, I think it's $3,500 it costs. So €279 versus sort of $3,500.
Huge.
It's a big difference. Now, a couple of things. First of all, this is for mild or moderate hearing loss, and that was very apparent to me. What happened, the process in how it works is when you are wearing the AirPods Pro, you go into your iPhone settings, and then you'll see a menu which says AirPods. Hit that, and it will invite you to take a hearing test. If they're the AirPods Pro 2, not the regular AirPods, not the last generation AirPods Pro, only the AirPods Pro 2. You do that, it gives you a beep in each ear for about 3 minutes, different beeps, and you say, can you hear it? Yes, no. It'll then assess your hearing level. If it's weak, it then kicks in, its hearing aid feature then kicks in, and that amplifies sounds quite a lot around you. Now, it's using the microphones on the AirPods, so it's quite similar to a transparency mode in most earbuds that you would have bought in the last 18 months have something called a transparency mode. And that's supposed to be if you're a cyclist or if you're out and about and you need to hear what's going on. Or if you're having a conversation with somebody in a shop or with somebody else, you want to hear what they're saying. The microphones kick in and they pipe in the sound, the audio into your ears. A lot of times it's very tinny. It's not great quality.
Right.
But it's, roughly speaking, it's a much more powerful version of that. And it's using AI as well.
It did. And like, I'm interested here because this is like a foray by Apple into sort of almost like a domestic aid, you know, into people's lives. Like, what are the
Apple are all about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the watches. So when the watch launched, 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, 10 years ago, Tim Cook's whole thing was our big new category in the long term is going to be health. That's right. Tim Cook's big idea for Apple in the medium term. Health. We're going to be as big in health and health aids and health accessories as anything else. So this kind of makes sense in terms of that strategy. Now, there are a few problems with this. Okay. With an AirPod Pro as a hearing aid. The biggest one, I think, is a social one. So if you have a hearing aid, in general, it's discreet to the point of almost being invisible. That means if I'm sitting here with you and I'm wearing a hearing aid, you may see it, you may not. If you do, you know it's a hearing aid. Therefore, you know that I'm wearing it for that purpose, to talk to you. If I sit down here with you casually or sit down in a group with a bunch of friends with my AirPods in and don't take them out when you're trying to have a chat to me,
yeah, it's considered rude.
Now, there might be a generational issue here. This might be a kind of a thing where it's very rude over a certain age. Say if you're over 40, it's very rude. If sort of between 25 and 35, it's sort of rude, but you're getting more into the territory. And then maybe under 25, but like how many under 25s need hearing aids, right?
Yeah, but I think sub 25, you see it at the till in, shops. You see the headphones.
And that's Apple's argument. Because I asked them about this when they launched this feature. Apple's argument is that people now wear buds or AirPods in for 6 hours a day, regularly. They will around town, out and about, in shops, even in company sometimes. their point is, from their observation, it's not considered rude to in the way that it was before. I don't know if they're right about that. If you take, say, noise-cancelling headphones, a lot of people wear noise-cancelling headphones. If somebody were to come down and have a conversation with a bunch of friends, someone they hadn't seen before, and they left their noise-cancelling cans on while they were doing it, I don't know. It's a little bit like going to somebody's house and not taking your coat off. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's but like
A little bit of a
there's
rude
an issue
thing going on there.
even with the, like in the office, for example, we all wear headphones in the audio department, and if there was a light indicating or some sort of visual factor that would indicate that the person who has the headphones or the AirPods on was listening to something, or if they were just sitting in their ears, that would be indicative to me to walk up to someone's desk and say, hey, can I get some help on this? But it's not, it's not obvious that they're listening to something, or
and also
not.
That's a work situation. That's a professional tool situation. So the way Apple dealt with this issue with the Vision Pro, the big headset, was really dystopian way. This is the thing that we all sort of laughed at was, you can choose to have a digital version of your eyes to be sort of visible on the front of it if you want to be available to chat. And I guess
It's very freaky looking.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Vision Pro still hasn't been launched in Europe yet. So, it's been launched in the UK, but with no sign of it yet in Ireland. I'm not sure if it will be at this point. But but they're the two clashes of sensibilities that are involved here. So that is a downside to an AirPod Pro, to being a hearing aid. And even if maybe you might argue, yeah, but just tell them it's a hearing aid. So then you keep having to say, by the way, I have a hearing
aid. And the point, as you mentioned there, the point of hearing aids now, they're getting more subtle and is discretion. Like, you don't want to signal to someone that you have bad hearing because there's some sort of stigma about it. And as well, like, it's interesting.
Well, you could twist that argument and say by wearing an AirPods that you're taking the stigma away because so many people wear AirPods and therefore
it's more accessible. Yeah, that's a fair point. But then the two of those ideas compete with each other. The idea of being rude and the idea of making it accessible for all. But also the fact that in-ear headphones are contributing to hearing loss on a massive scale.
That's an irony.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know about that as a reason not to use them though. And this is the reason why. I think it's undoubted that headphones and earphones and loud music and going to gigs contribute to hearing loss at any age, but you particularly notice this as you get older. But the thing about that is that, like, life, your eyesight goes, your hearing goes, your faculties go as you get older. Now, you don't want to accelerate those, but like wearing headphones or listening to music or listening to loud noises, I don't know if that you have to live, okay? Right. This is a kind of a weak argument. I realize it even as I'm saying it, but I don't think that because headphones or earphones played at an excessive volume contribute to hearing loss. I don't know if that's a reason for not using AirPods as a hearing aid.
Yeah, and I mean, like, they're lowering the barriers as well. Like, the only thing that you pointed out in your article is the fact that the battery is short-lived compared with a natural hearing
4
aid.
to 5 hours you're going to get out of a single box charge, and then you have to charge the box maybe every 4 cycles. So you get your 4 or 5 hours, and then you have to put the AirPods back in the pillbox for for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. To get maybe 60%, 70% charge, and I'll give you another, say, 3 hours. And you're on that kind of a cycle. So limitations, because with a conventional hearing aid, the small batteries, they'll go for over a week.
Yeah.
Then again, they are throwaway batteries. So from an environmental point of view,
very
not
good.
great. But at the end of the day, €279 versus $3,000. I think that's what it's going to come down to. So anyway, lastly, and staying again with Apple, the new entry-level iPhone 16e. So this is it right here. I've been playing around. I've been testing it so far. So if you were to look at this phone in my hand, you would immediately think I think you would think, iPhone 15. So it doesn't have the dynamic island, the floating thing at the top. It has the notch. So that's like iPhone 15, iPhone 14, iPhone 13. Around the back, it only has one camera. So that's like the old iPhone SE it's replacing. So just for anyone who doesn't know, iPhones for the last few years have had, you've got the Pro and the Pro Max at the very top. You've got the regular flagship. I'm talking 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then at the entry level, you've had the iPhone SE, which is like the old iPhone with the button on the front.
Yeah, the home button.
Fingerprint button, Touch ID button, home button. No more home button anymore on any iPhones. So this is now the entry level on the iPhone.
What's the sort of thinking behind that? Is that cost cutting, or is that just
So I think the reason behind it is, first of all, nobody wants a phone with a small screen anymore. So this is a 6.1 inch screen. It's exactly the same display as the iPhone 16, right? In fact, almost everything about this is exactly the same as the iPhone 16. It's 250 quid cheaper, which for me, in my testing, I think it's going to eat into the sales of the iPhone 15. But why have they made it, and why have they replaced the iPhone 16 or the iPhone SE? Because nobody wants a small screen anymore. That's my view. The second thing is that Apple is putting an awful lot of stuff around Apple Intelligence.
Yes.
Okay. And to do that, you need the latest chip. So the iPhone 15 won't do Apple Intelligence. The iPhone 14 won't. 13 won't. The iPhone SE wouldn't. But the iPhone 16e, all the iPhone 16s will.
Yeah, and they have the A18 chip, which is an Apple chip versus a Qualcomm chip. So they're bringing it in.
Yeah, now they've used their own chips for a few years, but the latest chip is the one they want to be able to operate Apple Intelligence. But Apple Intelligence doesn't even launch fully here until April. So we haven't had much of a chance to test it out. Although ironically, every time I go to the States, which is almost every month now at this point, Apple Intelligence switches itself on by default. As soon as I get off the plane, I get Apple Intelligence.
Just for the listener, you said it was €250
cheaper. So it's $729.
$729
versus starts at $729, starting at 128 gigs,
right,
up to 512 gigs. Whereas the iPhone 16 starts at $979 for 128 gigs.
And any drawbacks?
There's only one actual real drawback, and that is the single camera. So it has the single 1x camera. It's a 48 megapixel camera, so you can use it as a sort of a small telezoom, 2x and 3x, 4x. The regular iPhone 16 has this main 1x camera, and it has an ultra-wide 0.5x camera as well. Now, I find that very useful. I'm a photographer, so I like that. It's very good for video. It's very good for macro photography. Most people probably don't care, I suspect. So if you're somebody who uses your iPhone for, news, media, social media, taking photos, but just the regular camera, taking videos, just the regular camera, there actually aren't many disadvantages to this. It's the same screen, exactly the same screen, exactly the same chip. It's the same size, the same weight. It feels the kind of the same. Now, you can only get it in black or white compared to the colors. But I'm just looking down here at the list here of stuff. I'll tell you the things it doesn't have. So it does have wireless charging, but it doesn't support the MagSafe.
Yeah, so it's slower, right?
So it's slower charging. Is that a major thing? I think most people still wire charge their phones personally, but it also doesn't support ultra wide band, which means that if you're using Find My to find your lost AirPods down the back of the couch or your AirTag, it won't have the same, beep, 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 beep. Like you won't have the same absolute proximity accuracy as you would with a regular. Again, that's kind of marginal. The screen doesn't go quite as bright. It's the same resolution screen, same type of screen. Doesn't quite go quite as bright, but it's bright enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the same camera action button that the iPhone 16 have. I don't use the camera action button.
Surely you can use those hand signals anyway if you're, doing the kind of selfie stuff.
Can you? That's a good question.
Yeah, if you like, usually there's some function. It's the same
On the iPhone?
Same on Androids. Like if my A25 can do it, then
Well, Androids have an awful lot of those kind of sort of knacky little functions.
Yeah, gimmicky.
I don't know if you can do that with the iPhone. I don't think you can, actually. I might be wrong. I'm going to be morto now if you can't, because I know a lot of people will get in touch. Doesn't come in the same range of colors, but I mean, same 5G, same USB-C charging, mostly the same camera, and Apple Intelligence as well, and 250 quid cheaper.
yeah, if you're buying a phone in the next 7 days, you know, and you have a grand, like,
Well, if you have a grand, then you can get it. I don't know what the 512. I always get the maximum storage memory possible. But if you've got a grand, then you can certainly get the 256. You might even be able to get you might be just a bit more than a grand for the 512. Right. But a 512 gigabyte for an iPhone 16 is like, I don't know what it is, 1,400 quid or something. So you really are not making much. It doesn't feel like €250 less of a phone to me.
yeah,
It really doesn't. So kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know if I would call it a bargain, because at the end of the day, it's still, €729, which is a lot. And like, it still doesn't have, for example, Apple still uses the 60 hertz slower screen. So almost on any mid-range phone you buy, you're going to have like a real fast, smooth scrolling screen, 90 hertz or 120 hertz. This is fine. It probably doesn't put anyone off from buying an iPhone, but it's still only 60 hertz.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. So anyway, that is the iPhone 16e. I mean, it's a pretty good deal. I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. And that has been the AirPods Pro 2 as a hearing aid. And that has been Apple's $500 billion investment into the US as a sop to President Trump. This has been the Big Tech Show. Gav Hennessy was on sound. JJ Clark, who's been with me, produced this episode. And I'm Adrian Weckler. And we'll talk to you soon.